Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Owen in Oregon. Hi, Owen. You're on with V and Thomas.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
What can we help you with today?
Wow. So first of all, my heart's about ready to pound out of my chest, so forgive me if I trip up.
No worries.
Okay, cool. I was raised in a Roman Catholic family. That's my first problem.
Okay.
My second problem is I have the misfortune of being born without a bullshit detector.
I think none of us are.
None of us are. That's something you develop over time.
Okay, cool. Well, mine needs some help developing. So,
All right.
Essentially, what made me want to call in today was, as a young adult, I got caught up in a really traditional, really conservative, fundamentalist Catholic cult, which sounds like an oxymoron, but it is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Got out of that, kind of bounced around with different spiritual paganism, all that kind of stuff.
Yep, sounds familiar.
Last year I started listening to, Seth Andrews, Richard Carrier, Price Fitzgerald, all of those. Started realizing that the origins of all of this stuff is pretty suspect at best, and that a lot of what I had always been raised to believe in terms of like Catholic history, church history is pretty BS. But the problem that I've been finding is that I keep coming back to the thought that, well, if anything's true, despite all the evidence, it's got to be the Catholic Church because, and this, I know that from an outsider's perspective, this probably sounds crazy, but they have all of these supposed proofs and miracles that just, from someone who doesn't really know much, seems kind of convincing.
Well, can you give us one to start with?
Okay, well,
before you do, the reason that I ask is because I've been in your shoes before, Owen, and yeah. I've been in the exact position that you are right now, where I say, well, if it's not true, how do you explain these miracles? And I was always told growing up, there's just so much evidence, there's so many miracles, it's out there, and I never really bothered to look behind the curtain. And as soon as I started going one by one, like, there's times where you might see something that you can't explain. It doesn't make it supernatural. But what I found time and time and time again was I found misdiagnosis. I found, you have cases of cancer where there's, spontaneous remission, and it's the rates of spontaneous remission really don't improve at all with prayer. And, you start seeing prayer studies where people pray over, 100,000 people, and there's absolutely no positive effect from prayer. You start seeing cases where people misremember. You see cases where people exaggerate in order to, it's called pious fraud. There's actually a term for it, where they will say things that are not true to increase people's faith. So, like, if you have something that's miraculous, that's not just a secondhand anecdote, which is the worst form of evidence. If you have something verifiable that we can test, I'd love to walk you through it. But I came up empty, and I found the scientific explanations were far more persuasive, to say the least.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm sure it's not going to come as any surprise when I tell you that, I can't say that I saw somebody levitate or that I saw, a statue suddenly come to life or start walking around. But, I've just gone down such a rabbit hole the last couple of months about, mostly researching, stuff from the Catholic Church. And you're talking about healing. And for a long time there, I was really obsessed with things like Lourdes and reading up on, all of their supposed healing miracles and learning that, a lot of this is all secondhand hearsay from 200 years ago. And that, nowadays we have a lot of things that can be, explained and accounted for.
Right.
But then every time that something new crosses my mind or pops up, I just keep thinking, okay, you know, what if this is that one thing that nobody's thought of and nobody can explain? Like, you know.
But Owen, even if you can't explain it, is the most logical evidence that all the laws of nature that we've been testing for centuries completely were suspended for this one case? Or is it more likely that someone is mistaken or confused or lying or misremembering, or, you know, even if you see, like, I just took a picture, I posted it on Twitter the other day, of this sign that had this black covering over the top of it. It had like a little light on top of a triangular sign. And from a distance, I swear to you, it looked exactly like the Nazgul. Because it had this black trash bag over it. You know, the Nazgul from Lord of the Rings is like a ghostish, ghoulish figure. And if I were to see that at nighttime and I was religious and I saw it from a distance, I would have been freaked out and thought that it was some type of demon. But it wasn't. And the fact is, there's a word for that. It's called Pareidolia. It's where our eyes and our mind are really good at seeing patterns, even when there is no pattern. There's an entire subreddit. That's like
seeing Mary in French toast, right?
Right, exactly.
There's an entire subreddit called r/Pareidolia, where they have things that look like faces, but you know they're not. It's just, oh, hey, here's a you know, a bus or something.
Here's Jesus in a dog's butt. Yeah, and I think it's also important to know that a lot of, one thing you could do, I'm not sure if you've done this yet, this is something that really helped me, is research how the Catholic Church got started and research how it grew into what we understand it to be today. There's a really good book. It's called Religion and the Decline of Magic. And who's the author? Keith Thomas. And that book by itself helped me so much to kind of understand exactly where things came from and how these myths and these stories and these legends and these accounts of miracles developed. For example, do you know why the priest puts the wafer inside the mouth of the people taking communion?
I probably used to know, but not anymore.
Well, the reason, according to this book, is that people were taking them and not eating them and using them to turn invisible and steal from their neighbors, allegedly.
Oh,
and
is that right?
Or they would grind them up and put them in their gardens to make their vegetables grow faster because they believed it was the body of Christ. And it was magical. And only priests could do magic. That was the difference. And so they were like, how do we keep people from taking these and doing bad things with them, like turning invisible? The answer was to put them directly into the mouth of the person taking communion so that they knew that they were going to eat it.
Yeah, that's not the explanation that I used to hear growing up. But
exactly.
Doing all this research, I've learned that, I mean, first of all, that the church is more corrupt than I ever could have imagined when I was still a practicing, like, all 4 feet in Catholic. But that, you know, the origin that it came from is nothing like you learn in catechism class.
No, it's not. And it's not necessarily that the people teaching you are outright lying. That's what they've been told, and that's what they've been told. Right. Yeah. But understanding where it comes from and the origins of how these things that today are taken as, oh, obviously this is how we do things because X. When you find out it's really because of a myth that somebody turned invisible and stole their neighbor's cow, it makes a difference. So that's my suggestion for getting started on kind of debunking some of these concerns of yours.
Oh, and I'll give you, I'll equip you with one of the most powerful tools that you can have in determining fact from fiction. Would you like that?
Yes, please.
There is a story. I'll start with a story, and I'm getting somewhere with this. In India, there was a statue of the Virgin Mary, and this was a weeping statue of the Virgin Mary. And I'm sure you've heard these tales within the Catholic Church where they'll have this statue of the Virgin Mary that starts crying, and they're like, oh, it's a sign that it's, you know, some holy thing or something.
Yep.
In this particular instance, a man named Samal Edmaraku went and investigated it. And he discovered that there was actually a pipe, a toilet pipe, that was broken, that was causing, it was leaking, and the water that was flowing down the face that they would see, an occasional drip flowing down Mary's face, was actually toilet water. And people were collecting it and drinking it. when this guy came out with this discovery, instead of saying thank you so much for showing us how horrible and unhygienic and stuff this is, instead he was accused of being blasphemous and he was ran out of his country. Now, if you were to see another statue and you come along and you realize, hey, this other statue it's a statue of the Virgin Mary and it's crying tears. Well, the other one was a fake, but this one's totally real.
Yeah.
You can do that for every single supernatural claim one by one by one until you hit one that you don't know how to explain. The tool I want to equip you with
kind of where I am
is it's a skeptic's maxim. It's extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So when I say I don't believe in God, or when I say I don't believe in miracles, or I don't believe in the supernatural, I'm not saying I'm closed off to those ideas and that I'm just cynical and I'm, grumpy or hurt or something by it. Not at all. For me, I followed that stuff for decades and I loved it. I loved being in the church and stuff. I didn't have any bone to pick or anything. I just found that the evidence didn't match the claims. And so when you see that these claims are debunked one by one, you don't have to go through every single one of them to say sooner or later that until they actually put forth evidence that is as extraordinary as you would expect with a claim of that magnitude, that all the laws of physics would suddenly come undone in order for this one supernatural thing to occur. Until we have substantial evidence, all you have to say is, I don't believe it yet. I don't believe you. I'm going to wait until I have sufficient evidence to take that leap.
Yeah, and I'm definitely been trying to get to that point more, and also using the what is it called, the outsider's test for faith. When it comes to examining this kind of stuff more, because I fully admit that I tend to only take seriously the ones that come from my Catholic background, and it isn't because I want to affirm it as true. I'm actually trying actively to get away from it because it's been a very actively harmful thing in my life. I'm queer, so that's like not the best combination, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
But those are the claims that you're endeared to because you were raised with them.
Right.
Yeah.
They make more sense to you because that's how your brain developed. You developed in that way of thinking. And that's totally understandable.
And they have so many like public or supposedly like public big name supposed miracles that they seem like they have a monopoly on it. At least that's how they like to promote themselves, is we're the only ones that have all of these amazing things. And I mean, I have noticed that most of the ones that I focus on happened so long ago that, I can't test them. Like, there's supposedly a nun from like the 1600s who predicted the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s. And I'm sitting here like, okay, well, I don't have her original documents.
Right.
I don't have access to, how do you know things weren't rewritten? How do you know that it hasn't been covered up and redacted? Because
you don't even have to go that far, Owen.
Exactly.
You don't even have to go that far. When you have thousands of texts and thousands of predictions, it is so easy to cherry pick ones. And like, I can take a claim. Like, I did this on my channel. I did a whole video on prophecy, and I said, I bet you I can take one of the quatrains of Nostradamus. He's allegedly this, great prophet and stuff from, a couple hundred years ago. I can take one of his quatrains and claim that it predicted that Kim Kardashian's butt would go viral on the internet. And I did. All I had to do was I scrolled through, he has hundreds of quatrains, and I scrolled through until I found one that it was like, something about like, the father will lavish the lady in the stream or something. I was like, here it's clearly talking about how Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the internet, is, making this thing that, is her sex tape went viral on the internet. We're talking about streaming videos and stuff. And you can go through and you can do that with anything. And I used I used a preposterous, an utterly preposterous example to make the case. But you can do this with anything. And people come in after the fact and they say, okay, we just read through hundreds of prophetic predictions. Now you have thousands of different events that you compare them up with. So you could say, okay, this this one thing they said, you know, they talk about war. Okay, well, how many hundreds of wars have there been since they made that prediction? Which one could it be talking about? And then you just go detail by detail. And sometimes they're not even a good fit. Sometimes they miss on 90% of it, but people just draw attention to the few tiny parts that it hits. They quote mine that, throw it in quotes, and say that they predicted 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can totally see stuff like that. You know, I used to be into Nostradamus when I was like 12 and thought that was a cool thing.
The psychic twins do it too.
Yeah. I guess it comes up with, like, you know, when you finally get like one claim that's like really specific and it has dates attached to it and it seems like it's really cool. But even then it's like, how many thousands of others have we just not remembered because they never came true?
Well, yeah, there's a phenomenon where we remember the hits and forget the misses, right? That's why people go to slot machines and get caught in that loop of they remember it when the machine lights up, yay, you won, and they forget all the times that they lost. Yeah, it's a very, very human psychological thing that happens.
Isn't it called the barnyard door fallacy? Where it's like shooting a shotgun blast at a barnyard door, or shooting a bunch of shots at a barnyard door, seeing where the clusters are, and then drawing the bullseye around it.
Right, exactly.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that analogy before, but I hadn't thought of like applying it to the situation. That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think right now you're asking all the right kinds of questions. You're aware of the right things, that you are filtering your understanding of the world through a very specific lens, and you're doing your best to take that lens off, or at least, you know, for a certain amount of time to determine whether or not these things you're being told hold up outside of that particular lens. And that's a huge deal by itself. So kudos on that for sure. My suggestion would be to realize that you don't believe things until they can be proven false, right? You disbelieve things until they are proven true. If you approach the world as though everything that everyone said is true until you disprove it, you're going to believe a lot of really funny things, and a lot of them are going to contradict each other. So when you're looking through these things, as you're doing your research, maybe just that one shift of, instead of saying, this is true, I need to disprove it, start by saying, I don't know if this is true. Let me see if I can accurately prove this to myself. And if you can't, then you are completely valid in disregarding it.
And I would say, not just can I disprove it, but has it been disproven already? Can it be disproven by science? And is there even a way to falsify it? Is it falsifiable? Because I could claim that there's some deity out there that exists that made everything, but we can't detect him, we can't see him, smell him, hear him. He doesn't interact with the world. It's like, okay, cool story, bro. How do we disprove it? How do we test it? You can't. You can't. It's utterly unfalsifiable. And so it's kind of useless to me in how I go about living my life. And there's no way to know.
Yeah, and I think that last one is what is something that I really got to work on, because, you know, being raised Catholic, it's always like, you know, certain people get visions and certain people get apparitions of the Virgin Mary or whatever, and that's where they're like getting these supposed predictions and all that. Well, I can't falsify that they didn't see something or hallucinating, or that they didn't just make it all up, but it's also gotten to the point where I can't keep living my life based on what somebody 400 years ago claims that they might have seen.
Yeah.
And Owen, there are so many phenomena in the world that are rare. They're rare enough that a lot of us haven't necessarily heard of them, but that doesn't mean that they aren't natural and that they don't exist. I'll give you a couple of examples. I did a whole talk on this in Israel, but there are phenomena that people attribute to the supernatural, to, you know, spiritual instances like demon possession, and we find out, oh, hey, it's defining seizures. He's talking about a seizure or sleep paralysis or something like that. But there's phenomenon like the ghost frequency, which is a frequency of infrasound it's around 19 hertz, I believe, that's just low enough that, like, we can't hear it with our ears, but that doesn't mean we can't detect it with our bodies, just because like there's tremors and stuff that our bones might be able to pick up on. You might kind of get some goosebumps or feel a little bit queasy. And they found that in certain buildings that people said were haunted because they got this weird, uneasy feeling. When they go in and they actually test out what sound frequencies are being detected, it's just sound. That's all that it is. There's a fan or a vent or something that's whirring that's causing this frequency of sound to be emitted. It's purely natural. It's not ghosts. It's not some, weird supernatural haunting or something. Now, that's just one instance. You may be familiar with that, and you may not be familiar with hundreds of other things. And even if you go and you Google search things that people often mistake as aliens, or that they often mistake as ghosts, or they often mistake as demons, or insert whatever supernatural, paranormal, crazy phenomenon here, you're still probably going to miss some stuff.
Right.
That doesn't mean it doesn't have a natural explanation, though.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to shake that kind of, way of thinking that I was always brought up with something that's a little bit more rational. And it's not an easy straight line, but I've been listening to you guys. I've been listening to Matt's show, just trying to find new resources to form around, and you guys have really been great.
Oh, thank you so much for watching and for calling in. I know that this is hard. I know that this isn't a straight line, and it's not. You don't have the checklist. You don't start questioning, and somebody knocks on your door and gives you here's the pamphlet on how to deconvert. It's a process you have to figure out for yourself. But we're here for you, and we'd love it if you called back and let us know. If you come across something that makes you rethink, or if you come across something that completely proves that Catholicism is true, definitely let us know, because we want to know that. But yeah, we're here for you.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. You guys do. Y'all are out there doing the world's work, and I appreciate you guys.
I like that. I like that a lot. Thanks so much for calling in, Owen.
All right, y'all take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, we definitely don't go and knock on doors.